Oh, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the madness of spring.
Yes.
Freezing cold sun.
Well, we had sun earlier, and it was lovely. I actually went out in that. But as I said, all our blackthorn trees are now out. So we've got Ceridwen's tree out, which is absolutely lovely. They're just going gorgeous. So I'm looking forward to quite a lot of sloe gin this autumn.
Excellent.
There are practical and very spiritual reasons why one worships trees, you see.
Absolutely. Yes, our cherry blossom is out on our little cherry tree in the garden, which is very nice. But yeah, we've been out planting the dahlia corms, keeping them in the greenhouse, but planting them up and seedlings putting on, and all the preparation stuff.
Yeah, I've got a load of salad seedlings now out in the garden, but they're all covered because I knew this cold snap was coming, so they've all got their protection on because the poor little things, oh no, we don't want to go out there.
But the heating on.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think they're doing all right. So that's all right. So and my fruit mostly seems coming on all right. So
good.
I'm pretty pleased with all that.
Good.
What else have you got in your greenhouse?
Not a huge amount this year because of all the work that's going to be going on in the house and everything, but we use it mainly. My husband loves dahlias, so it does overwinter the dahlias. Yeah. Usually it's usually bedding plants. We have got some sunflower seedlings in there at the moment.
Great. Yeah. But you don't do tomatoes and things like that in it?
Well, no. My dad grows lots, so.
Well, you know.
Yep.
Well, the old one, don't keep a dog and bark yourself, you know.
Exactly. I grow some chilies occasionally because hubby loves chilies, but no, it'd be nice to have the room to do allotment kind of stuff, but no, time and space. Well, yeah, it's usually bedding plants.
Yeah. Time is such a thing, isn't it? I am still behind with things.
Yeah.
I don't know what's the matter with this year.
It's because you're at home.
I've been at home since 1983, 3, and no, 1994. Sorry, 1994. So that's nearly 30 years. I've been working from home. So
you're not allowed out to do your rituals and your workshops and all that kind of thing, are you, at the moment? So I think I
didn't say a word.
handed more time, supposedly. No, this last 18 months has been super busy, just online.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, one of the big things, certainly for me, that and since midwinter, it's just gone.
Yeah.
And I have still got something to catch up with, and it's like, whoa, you know. And I'm not even like going out, and I don't go down to Exmoor anymore and do stuff down there. So it's like, right, okay, the workload's really getting heavy. But that's, you know, it's okay. I think the worst thing at the moment is the novel, which is doing very, very well, and the agent is pleased, but she keeps bullying me into doing other doing it better. Doing other things to doing it better. Well, I mean, for goodness sake, that's why I have her. So, you know.
Well, yes, that's their job. Yeah, that's their job. Actually, that's interesting. You should mention that because we had a question this morning. Someone asked this morning about the process of writing books and how specifically we write them, whether it is do we plan everything ahead? Do we have it all organized, or do we just wing it?
Or any variation between the
two.
Between,
yes.
So go on, you can start then. How do you do it?
Well, I don't write fiction. I think that hats off to anybody that does. I think that's super, super special talent to have. Yes, I do plan. I usually plan the chapters out roughly, and then I kind of start researching it, and it flows then, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yes.
Sometimes the order changes by the time I get to the end of it, and then I'll find other bits that I slot in. But generally, I have a rough outline of chapters, but that's pretty much it. Then kind of evolves as it goes along. Chapter titles is really the basics that I start with.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Certainly for non-fiction.
Yeah.
And I always start with the question, like, the one that Trevor, that's our publisher, has got me writing now. He wants a book on environmental gardening. So fine. Right. Yeah, okay. Looking forward to that. That's great.
He's got a new series in the planning, hasn't he?
But I started something like that off with, so what is environmental gardening?
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's like, all your stuff, and, you've been kitchen witching for so long. It's all like in there, and it's easy, isn't it?
Generally.
To do, I mean.
Yes. Yes. Because when John Hunt said to me about writing a pagan cookbook, that was the first question I started with. What is pagan cooking? Yes, because you have to define it first, don't you? And
for somebody who hasn't got a clue and hasn't all the umpteen years of experience that you've got.
Yeah.
So, where did that take you? I mean, there you were with, what is pagan cooking? So where did it take you first?
All over the place. I think there's the kind of the things that probably jump out first, like cooking for the different Sabbats. But then it sort of goes on to cooking with the moon phases. But it did actually lead me generally to a couple of very specific things. Eating seasonally, which is one of my pet things.
Yeah.
And being mindful, particularly if you eat meat, about where things are sourced from. And for me, those were the two key things, I think. You can add in all of the Sabbats and the moon phases and all of that, and that can be part of it. But the two main things for me were seasonal and being mindful.
I think those two are just like so fundamental to all of the old ways, whatever way you're following them for yourself.
Yeah.
And being mindful, I mean, to me, is just like number one. You've got to think about, you've got to work on and think about and question everything at the beginning. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What is this? Where did this come from?
Yeah.
How did it live? And even for a carrot, how did it die?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. You've got to know where it's sourced from.
Absolutely. And people sort of, with things like that, people sort of say, oh, well, it's a vegetable. And you go and you think it doesn't feel.
Poor vegetables.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've talked about the trees, haven't we, before, with their energy patterns and how they connect with each other. Why not with carrots and things? But I think as well, the mindfulness expands for me onto the suppliers, to the little independent suppliers, rather than sourcing from big corporations that don't even think about the farmers and their living and that kind of thing. So it's all important from my point of view.
It is from mine too. I think that knowing all the way, knowing all the steps of the process is really important. And where can I get fresh, free range, happy hen eggs from?
Yeah.
Is there a place down the road? In my case, yes, there is. But there wasn't in Hereford. I had to source it differently because the people just didn't do the same things. Whereas I could walk down to it, the farm.
Yeah.
She's got them on the front gate, so I go down there and I get my walk and the whole thing.
Yeah.
not everyone's got, I mean, I didn't have that before. So I had to go and like, where are these coming from?
Yeah, see, I don't have that being on the edge of the city. So yeah,
Mm.
and yeah, I have had to source it.
So in the planning of the writing, I mean, all of that has to come in because that's what we're both about in many ways, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Honesty and clear thinking in that. I mean, that's like clairvoyance to me, clear seeing.
Yeah.
Because that's what it means in French.
Yeah.
And you see clearly the whole steps down to your lunch.
Yes. Definitely.
Or whatever it is you do. I mean, I take it right through to, you know, what cleaning materials do I use?
Yep. Yep.
Do I really need a plastic bag, or am I all right with everything else? And my grocery, my veggie supplier, everything comes in. It comes in two things actually. It comes in paper bags, which are great because either I use them again or they go straight in the compost. Or there's the new sort of plastic made from potato starch.
It's weird stuff, isn't it? It feels
weird. It really does. But I put it in the compost and it's gone when I come to put the compost on the garden. So
yeah, my veggie supplier does the same. It's compostable plastic, isn't it? Which sounds bizarre, but yeah.
But it really does work. And so my certainly my non-fiction planning has to go through all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it always has to start with what am I, and the question really is, what am I actually talking about here?
Which I very rarely know the answer to myself.
No, I find I don't too. And do you try things out on your husband or your other friends and things? Because I do. I sort of say, if I say this, do you have a clue what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah, I have my lovely gang, and yeah, I quite often throw things at them. Does this make sense?
Do you know what I'm meaning here?
Yeah.
And sometimes you get a yes, and sometimes you get a what? And sometimes your grammar has really gone to pieces, and they go, "You didn't really mean to say that, did you?" And so it certainly starts off with all that kind of thing. Fiction's sort of similar, but some people are really plot based in fiction when they start off. And some people are really character based when they start off. And I'm a character person.
Right.
Because if I'm reading a book, if I don't get on with, I don't have to like it. It's perfectly okay if I absolutely hate them. But if I really couldn't give a shit whether I ever saw them again, the character, I'm going to put the book down.
There's got to be a connection, hasn't there? Yeah.
That chemistry with the character.
Yes.
Do I care about this bloke? Do I care about this girl? And it gets a bit complicated. I just went to a really good Zoom seminar on Saturday with this bloke who's written a lot, and he's well known, well published, and fiction. And he's very good at craft. And my New York agent said, "I know this guy. He's really good. You've got to go."
Right.
So I did. And he is. And he said his first one is what they call POV, point of view.
Right.
And that's like who you think is going to be your major character, your protagonist.
Right. Okay.
And you have to like start with them. And then as you work through them, and this has happened to me before. I think I'm still okay with it at the moment. But you get there and you think, actually, this story is not about them. It's about him.
So it does evolve to a certain extent as you go along. Yeah.
Because you have to clarify what's going on, which actually also means you write an absolute mountain of what they call backstory.
Right. Okay.
Because you know that I've got this character, Jan, and I don't know her when I start off. Yes, I think I do. You know, I've seen her around a lot. I've been to the same, meetings that she's been in, that kind of thing. But I've got to get right in there, like become super best friends with her and know all her ins and outs. Otherwise, I can't write her.
Right, because you've got to know how she acts and reacts, and yes, that makes sense.
So if I put her in this situation, she's going to go,
yeah,
which is about as boring as a dead slug to the reader. Or if I put her in that situation, she's going, wow, whatever, and she'll become interesting. And so you have to keep an eye on your main characters and see how they go along. You have to keep an eye on all of them, because the one thing that, particularly now that everybody's, well, not everybody, but loads of people, they're like doing Netflix or Amazon or something, and they're watching stuff all the time. And if your character doesn't really do anything and has no particular traits and is boring, even if it's a sort of sub character, it's only like flick.
Yeah.
And you can't afford to have much in the way of flick
for
your reader.
Yeah.
So you've got to be incredibly tight on that. And you've got to know whose story is this?
Right, yes.
And that does take work, and it takes research again. You have to research fiction. I mean, are they interested in, okay, one of the things that Jean's interested in, but I thought it was going to be a major thing, but it's not actually going to be a major thing, well, until possibly the end, is Morris dancing. Now, I adore Morris dancing.
I love Morris dancing.
Freak. I am completely mad on it.
Absolutely love it.
Beltane Border Morris is like, yeah, any day.
It's one of those real traditions that we should cling on dearly to, because it is fantastic.
Fortunately, hopefully we still are, because I mean, a lot of the sides that I watch, I mean, they've got kids joining in, like 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds joining.
Excellent.
So it is going right through the generations. Anyway, I thought she was going to be sort of deeply into this, and she is. And it's part of what's built her. But of course, I spent quite a lot of time actually talking with the Beltane side and watching them. I watch them anyway, but reading about them and all this sort of thing to get more about her. And it turns out actually that although it's been necessary, it's not necessary until, as I said, I think it may well come in at the end.
Right.
The ending.
Yeah.
So you do all this research and you may find that actually I don't need most of it. I've done.
But it will have helped, won't it? Because it's helped you build that character.
It has. And then you get like places, and people love reading a really good description of a place that takes them there. It's very hard to do that if you haven't been there.
Yes. Yes.
So the idea of me writing some lovely book about the Rocky Mountains or the Arizona desert or something is like, don't even think about it.
Yeah, no.
Because I've not.
No.
Oh, I have been to the Rockies once, but I mean, that was in 1966.
Well, we wouldn't write about an area of paganism that we don't work with, would we? No. So, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And so you absolutely have to be there. I mean, I wouldn't write about sort of very serious, heavy druid ritual because I don't do it.
Yeah.
And there are people who do, and I will get it completely around the back of my neck if I try and do it. So, there are places you think, no, that's not me. So the other bit is you've really got to know you.
Yes.
And not the you that you would like to be out there, but the real one that's here. Because this is the one who's going to be doing the writing. And it's so that also requires a lot of effort. And you have to learn language and vocabulary and grammar, because you may I mean, fiction authors make up words.
Oh, I make up words all the time. Yeah. Trevor always says to me, I thought you'd made up that word, but actually I found it in the dictionary.
Well, I quite often do make them up. I mean, I've got one bit that something happens, and it's shining blackly.
Okay.
Now that gives you a sense of something, but of course,
Yes.
blackly is not a word.
No.
Well, it's not in a dictionary,
No.
put it that way. And hopefully I've put it in within, 2 or 3 other words so that you actually understand what shining blackly in this particular case is about. So you've got to know that. You've got to know when not to use good grammar and when to use good grammar. Because, well, I didn't know what us was doing down there. And I was brought around the corner here and then I was put on the table, didn't us? And I've got a character who talks like that.
I've met people who talk like that.
Many have. And Emily talking like that tells you a lot about Emily.
Yes.
But I can't have Emily doing, we didn't know what we were doing then.
No, it's not the same.
Because that's not Emily.
Yes, because in the written word, to get across an accent, it is quite difficult, I think, isn't it? And
I can only do the ones that I know.
You have to escape from grammar to get the actual accent to come across.
And that's another one. I mean, I've got a little bit of Yorkshire because my mum was. I've got a bit of Lancashire because my dad was. I've got a lot of Devon because I lived there for 25 years.
Yeah.
And I got a fair amount of Cornish and the differences, and a bit of Somerset and the differences.
Yeah.
Because I've lived there, been there a lot. But and I know a wee bit of Cockney, but not really. Not to do a proper good Cockney character.
No.
And
you have to be born under the sound of the Bow Bells, isn't it? To be real Cockney.
Absolutely, that's strict Cockney. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love it, and I did know it when we lived in Balham in London for a good many years, because, well, for the first 10 years we had a gorgeous vegetable and etc. street market, and they all talked like that.
Oh yes.
And it was like, whoa, this is fantastic. I mean, so was the food, but it was such a pleasure to, Saturday morning down the market was really worth it, and it was fun. But I didn't learn it enough to do it. So you got to learn all that kind of stuff, and you got to learn to notice things like, and they went down the path again. At the bottom, the road divided again. No, 2 agains, too close.
Yes. Oh, I'm very bad for repeating words. I am very bad for that.
You have to really
think about it. Yes.
And the other one that you, certainly for fiction, it's not the same for non-fiction, but for fiction. And he said this in this little thing. He said, if your story starts off with "it was," don't bother with a third word because nobody will read it.
Okay.
I know what he means.
Yes.
Was talking, was asking, was listening, was thinking, was cooking. Passive verb.
Yes.
And you're watching.
You've got to stay in the same text. Yes.
Yeah.
You have got to stay in the same.
If you're in the passive, you're watching a story happen.
Right. Yes.
If you want the reader to stay and keep turning the pages, he was tired. He talked.
It's got to be in the present, isn't it? It's got to be in the now.
He could.
You've got to live the story with them, haven't you? As it unfolds. Yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
And you've got to be there. So you've got to have an eye that catches it. And wases. He said modern stories are so full of bloody wases I can't read them. And I thought, you're on. I can't either.
No, I've not thought about that. That makes absolute sense. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And when you're actually doing what you're probably writing is backstory still.
Okay, yeah.
So you've got a scene and it's going to be fine. It'll work out really well. You've got to sort it out and then put it into action.
Yeah.
So you're right in a way. It is. I mean, don't anybody ever think writing is a hobby?
Oh no.
Both of us will kill you together.
I love it, but it is. It's a work. It's work.
It's
It is
hard work. Sometimes it's depressing too, isn't it? Because you know you can't get this right, and it's just not really happening.
Yes, and I think it depends. I've worked for 2 different publishers, and one experience they edit a lot more heavily, and I wasn't prepared for that, and that's a bit of a shock to have someone come back to you and say, that chapter's great, but here's 57 pages of edits for you. You used to look at it and think, oh.
Yeah.
Well, it you know, in the end it worked out right, and you end up seeing what they mean. But yeah, it's
but it is an education.
It is an education, yes, absolutely.
Certainly
yes.
for fiction writers, one of the total stand-up adages you get given all the time is you've got to kill your darlings. I so love that sentence. Yes.
That one out.
Yeah, because very often once you get out of this englamoured thing that you're in, and I don't worry, I'm still getting them. Once you get out of it, you go, no, it's flat. It's not working. It's not, not doing it. And I'm used to the editing like you are now, and it's usually fine. And there's got to be a lot less of it as I get better at the job.
Yeah, we learn from it, don't we? We do learn from it. Yeah.
With this, I mean, if you don't learn from it, go and sweep roads or dig gardens or something. There's no point,
It is all. It does. It helps to have someone have a look at from a different perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can get very sucked into just writing and writing and writing, and to have someone else to come and look at it and say, actually, it would be better if we did this. It does need a different perspective on it, I think.
And it's like what you're saying with the chapters and that sort of thing. I mean, I was just having this on Saturday with my agent meeting, and she said, we need this up front. We need this much closer to the beginning. It was sort of like 6 chapters down, and she wants it 3 chapters in, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And she said, no, that's really, it's the way it ends. That's really important. We need to know that now. And so, the past 2 or 3 days have been like, and you can't just move the chapters around like you can in Word. You've got to move them and then rewrite them.
Yes.
Because they won't work so well where you've just put them, and the bits that are wrong, and that somebody knows something they couldn't possibly know yet or whatever. And so it's okay.
Do you, with the fiction, do you know the beginning, the middle, and the end before you start to write it? Or do you have bits of it and sort of see how it flows?
Yes, I do. But it won't be very detailed. I mean, this one is about a girl who leaves home and she just about runs away from home, though with the help of her parents, because she's running away from somebody else. And she has to come back to sort out the mess that she's left when she ran away. With all the sort of like, I don't want to do that. Or I think I can do it this way.
I'm sure I'm sure we can relate to that.
It's how everybody is.
Yeah.
And I mean, all of my stuff is about the old ways. It's about the work, just as all of your stuff is all about the witch ways and the work. So the stories are too. And certainly for me, to a large extent, is like, here's your job, says Otherworld. And you go, I'm busy till Thursday. Or I can't do that. Or what? I don't understand. And so the stories are often about people who are in that situation. They have to step up, and stepping up is really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, people say, "Oh, just come on and step up." And you think, you don't know what you just asked.
Yeah, no, it's never that easy.
Not for anybody, not even, and in I think all the cases, both the other two novels, the people haven't gone in blind. They've known a bit, if not a lot, and that doesn't help. It doesn't make it any easier.
Mm.
And so it's like partly the stories are like saying, "Come on, you know, stop having a Disney perspective on this." Although he doesn't even do that either. But don't have a simplistic perspective on it. It's whatever you're going to be doing is hard work. Oh, and the other thing you must have in a book is that however your main characters start off, they've got to have grown visibly by
Right. Yeah.
You don't care about them if they turn out just the same.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, you've got to feel for them, haven't you? I mean, I've had books where I've cried when a character's died, or where I've had a character not end up with the person that I thought they were going to end up, and I've been really cross. That's how fiction books should grab you, isn't it?
Yeah.
It should kick your emotions.
Yeah, really be there. And that I mean, one of the endings that upset me, made me cry most, was Sam at the very end of Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay.
And he goes back after he's seen Frodo and Bilbo off. And he goes back and he opens the garden gate, and his little girl runs up to him and his wife and says, "Well, I'm back." And that's the last words of the book. And it was like,
But that's how books should make you feel, shouldn't it? That's how you want it to make you. It needs to kick those emotions like that. I think it is a super amazing skill to be able to write fiction. I really do.
I'm getting nervous. But it really is. There's another nice little trick, which is in it's a classic novel. It's Daphne du Maurier's My Cousin Rachel.
It's where my name came from.
Oh, way! It's one of my favourites. It's
my mum saw the film apparently on television, the film adaptation. So that's where my name came from.
The book, and I think the film begins with it. I don't think it ends with it.
Do you know, I've not actually seen it or read it. I should do, really, shouldn't I?
Oh, I think you'd enjoy it. I think you'd enjoy it, and it's not simple. It's quite twisted, and you do end up actually not knowing the answers to the question that's been through the book all the way, and that's right. No, it would wreck it.
Right. Yes.
And it starts off with the first line is, "They used to hang men at 4 crossways, not anymore though." And the last line is, "They used to hang men at 4 crossways, not anymore though." And that tells you the story actually of the book.
Right. Yeah, the opening line.
The opening and the finishing line are the same.
Yeah.
And it's just so clever. But it does, telling you that doesn't spoil anything. It's just like it's whoa.
I've got to be drawn in on the first page.
Yeah.
Like, I love reading, absolutely love reading, but it's got to grab me from the first page, because I have a lot of books and not a lot of time. So it's got to grab my attention in that first page for me to invest the time in reading it.
Yeah, it does me too. And if I've made it down 10 lines and I'm not carried, put it down.
Yeah.
It's not for me.
I got a few of those.
And one that a lot of my friends sort of don't understand is that I think Terry Pratchett was an amazing man and a brilliant author, and I can't read his books.
Really, he is my hero. He is my hero.
It's just sort of like, for me.
Right.
And
I think it depends on the books as well, because even he said himself, his first books in the Discworld series aren't the same as the ones you can see how his writing progressed as he went along.
And I was what's the witch one? I can't remember the title again.
There's several of them. Witches Abroad is one of them.
No, one of the early ones. This was
Lords and Ladies.
No.
Mine's gone blank now. The Weird Sisters.
Weird Sisters, that was it. And I mean, the title just went, oh, I need to read this. And my best girlfriend at the time, and we've lost touch since then, but she really liked him. So she said, oh, here, read it, you know. And it just went for me. And it is not fulfilling what I wanted. And I couldn't get to like any of the characters. That was the bad point.
I've got actually that picture there is of the three witches. That's a Terry Pratt. That's May Gray, Granny Weatherwax, and Nanny Ogg. That's the three witches. Yeah.
And I mean, their names, I love them. All that sort of thing.
He obviously knew his stuff. He did a lot of research about the old.
And he knew enough to know that he could do his audience like that. Now, I'm not part of his audience, but I may well reach some of the people who like him as well. Yeah. But it's like you've got to be where you are. And I can't try and write for Terry Pratchett's audience or J.K. Rowling's audience. I have to write what I am. Yes. And then get it as good as possible and see, you know, what happens to it there, which is.
But it would be a boring world if we all like the same things, wouldn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Everyone has to like, and we all like.
I mean, things, you were on the cooking just now, and you said you really like chilies, and that I hate them.
I don't, not as much as my husband. He does eat hot things, but I don't mind a bit of it. But yes, you've got to. Everyone likes different things. It's got to be like that. It'd be boring otherwise.
They do, and you mustn't try. And I think this runs for non-fiction too. You mustn't try and write what you're not to fit with a market.
Yeah, it's got to come from here. Otherwise, it won't. Yeah.
I mean, it'd be clueless if I start trying to write a cookery book. I can't write them like you. I can't even write them interestingly.
But even with cooking, I mean, I can cook, but I love baking. Cakes, cookies, bread. Love it. Cooking, not so much. I actually find cooking a bit of a chore. Baking, whole different thing.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, you know, somebody will say, oh, well, why? But if you actually sort of think about, like, you know, famous chefs and that, you know, he's really into pastry and baking, and he's really into sauces and ice cream or something, and he's really into doing vegetable things in a particular, you know, in all sorts of different ways. And they all have their
oh yes, they're all specialists in. Well, big restaurants have different chefs for different things, don't they?
They do, yeah. And you get different writers for different things too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I can go from Charlotte Bronte, say, Daphne du Maurier, up to, you know, super sci-fi authors.
Yeah.
And Georgette Heyer in the middle, kind of thing. So my taste is like enormous. Yeah. But it's still just, it's not, I'm stuck in one genre or anything. It's like, I like particular things, and particular things will quirk me. And that we were talking about Dan Brown on Saturday too.
Right.
And because you've got to respect the bloke. He's sold millions.
Oh, yeah.
I
wouldn't mind his royalty checks.
Me neither. He started his stuff. I actually knew the people who wrote Holy Blood and Holy Grail, and a couple of them I knew quite well. We were all working together about the same time down in that part of France. And so, when he started off with his first one, and they got very uptight, understandably, because he stole their research. And so that sort of set me off with looking at him. It all got sorted out in the end, and there is always the no publicity is bad publicity.
Yeah.
Which is true to an extent, although I don't approve of people nicking other people's research to that extent.
No.
But
we know how much work goes into it.
And you think, and you didn't even ruddy ask, and you didn't actually acknowledge. I mean, if somebody had put in, I'm dependent on this book to the work of Diddley-Bomb and Diddley-Bomb, who helped me enormously in their research, you can put up with an awful lot.
Yeah.
But he didn't. But I've read a couple of his books because I'm on the, how does he do that?
Yeah.
And we were talking about that, Catherine and I, on Saturday. And she said, I can't, his hero, I just want to kill all the time. And it's not even good because I can't even hate him properly. I just want to kick him. It's not the same. If all you want to do is kick somebody, it's not the same as a really good hate.
No.
So we were talking about that. And she said, oh, well, he does sort of, get into quirks about, so you don't know quite what he's going to do next. So I sort of looked at her and went, and she said, go on. I said, well, I do. I can see he's either going down there or down there.
Yeah.
3 sentences on, oh, he's going down there. Okay, I know
Yeah.
he's going now. And so you have to, that's another thing, be careful with, but it's a double-edged one, which I think Catherine is thinking about with me, is don't be so twisted that the people who Dan Brown has managed to, they don't know where he's going. Don't be so twisted that they don't see where you're going.
Right.
Or they don't get involved. Don't make, you've got to this sort of balancing act.
Yeah.
How twisted is that?
Yeah.
And I can be horrendously twisted because I love it.
Which is probably why we get on.
But some of the original sci-fi writers back in the 60s and the 70s that I read, then I still do read, and they are so well read. I mean, one of my favorites, he brings in Norse legend and Hindu stuff and British stuff. He's American from New Mexico. And all of this stuff in together, and then some astrophysics as well. And I'm like, yeah, come on, let's do this. And I have to slow that down a bit because things aren't the same.
I think it depends what mood you're in as well. As Terry Pratchett is he's my comfort read. I'll have a pile of books that I've not read yet, and I'll go back to one of his that I've read 7 times because it's easy to read. I love the Sherlock Holmes stories. I do
too.
I absolutely love them, but I have to be in the right frame of mind because they're what I call my clever books. So I have to focus, I guess, because it was a different language of sorts as well, wasn't it? It was written in such a different period of time as well. So I have to really focus on those ones. And you mentioned The Lord of the Rings, and I have read the whole series of the books. I love The Hobbit. I've read that and reread it several times, but the actual Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, I've only read once because I really found it hard going. Whereas The Hobbit, I love.
The Hobbit is much easier going than LOTR and Silmarillion, and I've read both of those quite a lot. I don't enjoy reading LOTR so much now because he becomes very academic at times.
Yeah.
And I no longer enjoy that. Whereas 30 years ago, I enjoyed it. 50 years ago, I definitely enjoyed it. I loved it. So it's a bit sort of like different in that way. I'm finding, I mean, I hadn't read any, I just got into reading Charlotte Bronte again. I hadn't read any since school, which is
I haven't.
50 years ago. And I'm actually enjoying them more now than I did then.
Right.
Totally different language to us now.
Yes.
Utterly different concepts of how life was.
Yeah.
But I don't mind that. That's absolutely fine. In fact, I enjoy it. But where a lot of people sort of say, oh, you know, Jane Eyre, it's a love story. No, it's not. And I sort of thought, well, I don't remember that from the first reading. And Paul and I were talking about it. And he said, no, do I? And it got me in, and I thought, I'll read it again. No, it's a woman's emancipation. Bloody hell, she does it well for somebody who's writing, you know,
which for that time,
1810 or something like that. And Jane Eyre is a very, she's a poor orphan. And I mean, in those days, if you were an orphan 10 to 1, you'd die.
Oh, yeah, no, your life expectancy was pretty short. Yeah.
And everybody treats you, well, nearly everybody treats you badly. So there's all of that kind of thing. And this girl keeps going from, I think she starts at about 8 or 10. The story starts, and all the way she's going. And then she meets the love interest, the Mr. Rochester. And someone was talking about it on the radio the other day, and she said, oh, he's so mean to her. And I was reading that bit again. No, they are flirting. But it is not the sort of cutesy flirt.
No.
It's a poke flirt.
Yeah.
So what about this then? So what about that then? What about this then? And you can feel it going up between them, which is quite fascinating, of course. And then, of course, the end of it, the woman was also saying, like, oh, she ends up, you know, she's looking after him all the time and all that sort of thing. And you read it again, and he goes blind, and she comes back and looks after him, and she's got him like that. She's totally in control. I mean, I'm not sure I'd like her because she's although you can admire her,
yes,
but it's not sweet at all.
No.
But as emancipation, you know, in a time when if you were a woman without a husband, again, you'd probably die.
Yeah,
if you didn't have money.
Yeah.
Because you had no one to look after you, nowhere to live, and no money to pay for anything, and all that sort of thing.
It's interesting to see the ones that become classics, isn't it? My son is doing Romeo and Juliet in English at school, and he's very upset about it because he Shakespeare, no, not interested at all. He actually loves Dickens. He said, why can't we be doing Dickens? I love those. 15-year-old boy loves Dickens. Doesn't like Shakespeare. But isn't it interesting that Shakespeare has stuck around for so long, and Dickens has stuck around? The things that they actually study as the classics in school still to this day.
Yeah.
The longevity of them. And he was saying, why is Shakespeare he said it's a load of nonsense. Why are we still learning this stuff?
And I can understand that, you know, as a 15-year-old boy to some, but it's an amusing one, which I didn't know.
With Romeo and Juliet, that's probably
yeah, but it is. I don't know how he's being taught it.
It's not enough. Yeah, no, it's not.
Talk about twisted. Oh my gosh.
That was the point I made. People dying.
It shivers, that one.
Yeah.
And it really is. But we were watching a program about Jane Austen, another of the classics that, you got, well, we certainly got funneled at school. And fascinating woman again. Totally fascinating. But nowadays she really is a classic. I mean, look on BBC, they've done the lot, and every damn time they do a series, nobody can get a word in edgewise because they've done it, and they do them well. But you know who else is using them and doing them, and it's working like bloody hotcakes? Bollywood.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I didn't know.
I love a bit of Bollywood.
They showed some of it, and I thought, shit, yeah, it works.
Fantastic.
Complete with dance scenes.
Oh, yeah, you got to have the dance.
The whole Bollywood thing. And there's this woman.
I will look this out. Fantastic.
Well, I was thinking that too. There's this woman who's like a really big Bollywood director. She's about 50-something, I suppose. And all there, you can see it. She's all absolutely there. And she's saying, oh, yeah. This is it. This is the story. We can do this, and we can do this our way, and it will still get over what we're doing. What she meant. And so they showed a bit of it. Yeah. So, guys, you want some new stuff on Netflix? Go look for Jane Austen in Bollywood. Sounds good to me.
I shall wait for Sherlock and Poirot to appear on Bollywood.
No. Sherlock is one of my heroes. I cannot see him as Bollywood. Well, actually, I can.
I love the Sherlock books, and I love all of the Sherlock TV and film adaptations. Yeah, I think he is a truly awesome character. And the writing, brilliant.
And of course,
big favourite.
What's his face? Who wrote him? My mind's gone a blank.
Arthur Conan Doyle.
Conan Doyle. I mean, well, he was one of us as well.
Oh yes. Supernatural and the paranormal, and
lots of experiments and cameras, which still get ripped off and told it couldn't possibly happen. But we'll sort of pass.
I live in Portsmouth in Hampshire, and he's got a strong connection here. And there's a whole exhibition of his in or around him in the Portsmouth Museum, and it's fascinating. The stuff that they've got is about him, the person. Really interesting.
And you start thinking, oh well, there's the fairies painting, fairies photograph, which everybody rips off, says it's rubbish. But you go and really look at the stuff and think, well, how do that? And I used to be, I was never a professional photographer, but I was in that class. I used to, have exhibitions of it and that. And I learned it really, it was fascinating. So I learned it really well. And that was one of the things we used to talk about. And so, well, actually, how would you do that? Come on, you've got all this modern shit.
Yeah.
How would you do it?
Difficult enough to do these days and do it really well, but to do it then,
and even when I was sort of doing it, which was sort of the 80s, and we didn't have like Photoshop.
No.
And I've done amazing things with multiple negatives and printing and all sorts of stuff like that. But even so, you sort of go,
with the technology and everything they had then or didn't have then.
Well, glass plates.
Very clever.
Silver on them. That's what they're taken on.
Very clever stuff.
Yeah. And so I really like him because of that. And he does without in any way overdoing it, because he was doing it for a magazine, a London magazine. You get the weird in. It sort of slithers under the carpet.
But even at the way that he wrote and the way you can see how Sherlock thinks and how he works through that process of finding all the clues to actually work that out, to write the story in the first place.
That is not my style. I mean, I love the really good, and they're mostly women writers who've written really good detective fiction.
Agatha Christie, of course, one of the
She's not, in my mind, the best, but
most well known, isn't she?
she's certainly one of the most well known. But when you get into, I can't remember the names, but a couple of fairly recent ones, one who died fairly recently, and you get into their plotting, and I mean, to me, I don't know whether have we talked about weaving ever on this? Anyway, I like tapestry weaving.
That's next week. We'll do
I like tapestry weaving, which is a frame and, you know, pulling threads through and that sort of thing. My best friend's mother was one of the champion weavers of Scotland. Now, she used to have, you know, a loom that you threaded up and you sorted all the different threads out, and then it clacked along and you kept pulling things up and down, and it produces amazing patterns, often in the finest silk stuff.
Yeah.
I've got a fabulous scarf she made me that way. And so we talk about it because I like working with wool, and particularly, and so does she. And so we talked about it. She, oh, you know, and she'd show me her loom, and I'd sort of, no, I mean, it should take her. She's going to do this sort of, I don't know, rug or some blanket or something, and it would take her like 3 or 4 weeks to plan and set up the loom before she could start weaving it.
Right.
It's quite mathematical.
Yeah.
And I was like, don't even stop.
No.
I don't do that.
No, that's no good for me.
The detective writing is like that.
Yeah.
It all has to be.
Yes, it has to, because it has to make perfect sense, doesn't it? Yeah.
And you will notice, you know, even if you haven't got that kind of mind, you'll notice if, you know, he said 5:26 just then, and now it's 5 past.
Yeah. 6. Yeah. Oh, to plan all that out.
Oh.
This is
not my bag. Not my bag. I'll make the tea. You tell me about it.
I'll stick with non-fiction.
And I'll stick with the sort of fiction that I write, because it does require bloody planning, but not to that extent.
Yeah. I think that's perhaps something that if you haven't had a book published before, you don't realize how much stuff goes on behind. Even before you've written the first page, the actual preparation and the research that goes into any book beforehand is phenomenal amount of time and effort.
And there's the things like you were talking about editing earlier, and I was talking about this sort of craft webinar that I went to on Saturday. There is as much craft in learning to write as there is in learning to paint Chinese watercolors or proper oils.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And it is craft just as much as that. And you may, you know, you're supposed to use a chisel that way, so you're going to use your chisel that way. That's fine, but you can't until you know the original way of doing it.
Right. Yeah.
So you've got to like learn your craft, which is partly learning grammar, partly enlarging your vocabulary as much as you can, and enlarging your thinking of what if, okay, he's going to turn right down this road. How about if he turns left? What happens? And it's all of that. And then how do I work that? And you want this thing to come in there and frighten the shit out of him or something. And how?
Yeah.
So that it doesn't, you know, make people laugh when you don't want them to laugh.
Yeah.
And there's so much craft in it as well. But there is in non-fiction writing, because you're trying to tell somebody something that they may not know anything about.
Yes. That I found quite, because I do things so often, you write it, and that's when the editor comes in and says, well, you haven't told them how to start it off.
No.
So,
yeah. I had this when I was learning programming, because I used to be a software boffin. And when you start off, we started off really well. We started off with the old punch cards, and we had to write on punch cards. God, it's a good training. I wouldn't recommend you take it up as a career now, but as a training, it was brilliant. And one of the first things we were asked to program was how to tell a Martian how to boil an egg. So, you know, you start off with, you take the egg and you put it in cold water, and that's it. What's an egg?
That's just what was running through my mind. You'd have to start the ad so that you'd have to start explaining what an actual egg is. Yeah.
Which is, of course, the point.
Yes.
And you have to take writing and non-fiction writing, particularly, you know, like my sort of start off with, what is environmental gardening? How is it different from wildlife gardening?
Yes. Yeah.
Is it different? How? What?
Yeah.
And you know, that's like finding the egg.
Yeah.
And you've got to do it. So what is, you know, okay, well, how's pagan cooking different from ordinary cooking?
Yeah.
You know, well, what's the difference? What makes it pagan as opposed to, you know, Mrs. Beaton or something?
Yeah.
And that, it requires you, I mean, you end up sitting there for hours, don't you, with a sort of pad and a paper, sort of scribbling, and umpteen pots of tea or whatever it is you drink. Eventually umpteen pots of hard spirits because you can't handle it any longer. And working it out. And you've got to do it in the forefront of your brain, because you know it all at the back. So it's on autopilot. But it can't be on autopilot for this poor sod who's never seen it before in his life.
Yeah. You have to change the way you think, don't you? And that's I think it was 2013 my first book was published. So that's what, 8 years. Yeah, something like that. My first books, some of the things that I read now, if I see it anywhere and I think, oh, wish I hadn't written it like that. Because even over the short period of 8 years, my writing and my way of looking at writing has changed.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So all of you budding writers out there, go for it, but find people that you like and trust to take you through the craft of it.
Yes.
Because everybody's got their muse, everybody's got their story. Everybody has got it, you know, even if it's non-fiction or fiction or whatever it is, you've got, I could do that. So learn how. I mean, you start off with spells, I mean, and you don't really know what to do, and you could easily cock it up.
Yes.
Who hasn't?
Yep. Been there, done that. Yep.
Absolutely.
And hopefully learn from it.
Yeah, you do. And usually, so far in both of our lives, I think we haven't done any horrendous damage.
No, touch wood.
Exactly. I got my hands well plastered on wood.
Fingers crossed.
But you've got to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
And writing is like that, and it has its way. I mean, neither of us would give it up, would we?
Oh, no. No. It took me a long time to find it. But no, I'm not. And I think, as we've said, I think everyone is different, and there is no one way that's right or correct, or like Terry Pratchett, love him, top of my pile. Not so much for you, but then Sherlock, we both love Sherlock. So there are ones that, there's different styles that suit different people. Yeah.
And so I'd recommend it, as if you feel you want something to do, I'd say go for it. But it is not easy.
No, no.
You get used to it rather than it gets easier, don't you?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm not sure that it ever exactly gets easier, but you get used to it, and you get, like you're saying, you know, you get better at it.
Better ways of doing it, I guess. Yes. Yeah. Right, we've talked for ages, all on the one subject.
Well, I hope it was helpful. We're subject largely today. Well done, us.
We've stuck the topic.
Excuse me, polish halo. Yeah, and okay, well,
we'll look forward to, 2 new books for you then, the environmental gardening one and your fiction one. We will look forward to those.
The environmental gardening one will come out first because Trevor wants it to come out first. And what I want it done with the fiction is going to take a bit longer. I mean,
it'll be worth it.
It's going to be well on its stocks next year. but it's going to take that long, whereas Trevor wants this one before then, well before then.
Yeah. Come on, what are you doing sitting here talking to us? You should be writing.
Exactly, he'd be saying that next, won't he?
Yes.
Thanks, Trevor.
Yes. So I will let you get back to your writing. And take care, be safe.
And you.
We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Will do.
Okay.
Take care then. Bye.
Bye.